Hey, welcome to How to Write a Novel. So this is a slightly different episode. This one, it's less about writing. It's more just about general productivity and such. But I think that's still that's basically what this podcast is about. It's very rarely about writing itself. It's much more about the process that works for me to be consistent and get things finished and come to the end of projects and such and such. So along those lines, I've brought up a few times in the run of this podcast this documentary I was working on. So it's this guy, Roger Swan, dude from the States who moved to Japan. He took videos of his time there and he unexpectedly died. And I only learned about him when he died. So I was going back through his YouTube videos and I was just fascinated by, his story's a good story anyway. He's an extremely likable guy. But also it was just an example of this thing that's happening now of the digital trail that you leave behind you, these digital footprints that you leave behind you. And just how fascinating it is to go back through somebody's life through these videos. And then after he died, people made tribute videos and they brought that up often, that some of them had met him, but most people never actually met him. They only also knew him through his YouTube videos. So I made a podcast about him and I realized hey, I've got this structure already done. I could just include the video back into this, make some changes here and there, and it could be a little documentary. Why not? Seemed pretty doable. But I had not yet gotten down this work ethic thing that this whole podcast has been about. That starting in my mid-30s, I finally really got comfortable with the idea of working on a project every day, even if it's just a little bit, and just being consistent and just keep pushing until things finally get finished. I had not yet hit upon that, So this is a perfect example, this project, of what happens when you do not consistently work on something. And that's that this thing it was a lot of work. I added in new bits to this video. I moved some things around. I changed a lot of the soundtrack so it wouldn't get copyright strikes on YouTube. And it was just a lot of work in general. I went through years and years of this guy's vlogs and I basically just found all the footage of any part in my audio where he talked. I put that stuff in, so there's his talking parts. I had to take out anything where he added, I didn't have to, but just for the style of it, I took out anything where he added his own graphics on screen. It's okay, I'll take all those out, so that limits what I've got. And then I just kind of made B-roll of basically every episode. I just took every little weird shot that he took of just something around Japan or something he was doing. And I put those all aside, so that was my pool to draw from of all right, let's try to build this out. Let's try to make this into a thing. And it was a lot of work. Best case scenario, it was going to take, probably a year and a half or so, even if I had my shit together back then and I just was a more consistent worker. But because I wasn't, I would just put it aside for years, just years, and then work on it in little bursts and then put it aside. So long story short, I finally finished it and I just put it up and it took 9 years, which is insane. And obviously it didn't take 9 years. It's not I actually worked on this thing for 9 years. But from the date of starting, I started in 2010, maybe 2011. And in 2019, the end of 2019, I finally fucking uploaded this thing. And again, it's just the same thing I've been talking about in this podcast, the same technique that got me to finish my nonfiction book that I wrote and is now getting me through the novel that I'm writing, is just work a little bit every day, just a little bit. And I wasn't as consistent even with this as I have been with writing. I really make sure I write every day. I still was a little faltery on this documentary, but once I finally did, let's just do it. Let's just make this a priority and let's just do a little something every day until it's finally done. And it's done. It really does work. It's fucking magic. So if you're curious to see it, just search for Tokyo Swan, a Roger Swan documentary. Roger is spelt a little weird. It's Rodger. And so that's another thing I wanted to talk about with this is it wasn't just my lack of a consistent work ethic. It was also having the right kind of vision for what's going to happen with this thing. Like, I think in order to maintain a consistent work ethic, it helps to have a path that you're trying to get to. Like, you see the beacon at the end of the road, and it seems like somewhere you can get to. And it doesn't seem like a big, overwhelming idea. Because in this case, in the case of this documentary, I really kind of sort of set up big walls to fucking climb that really did throw me off. It just really made me not want to work on it. Which was mainly, I guess, the idea that I didn't want to put all this work into this thing for nobody to see it. I didn't want to just put it up on YouTube and have it disappear. So I would think about, like, film festivals. Like, it would be cool to get it into a film festival. But how the fuck does that work? You know, I've got no experience with that. And I'm just imagining all the hoops I'd have to jump through of, like, do I have to get permission from all the people whose clips I used? Because the whole thing is built on YouTube videos, not just Roger's old ones, but other people's as well, people that met him and people that crossed over with him. Music rights and shit, like, how does that work? Even just submitting, just all of it was just like, whoa, very overwhelming. And the idea that, I mean, part of the charm of this documentary is seeing the video quality get better and better as the years go by. Part of it is like a little time capsule of, like, this is what videos looked like in the late 2000s. But that's okay for YouTube, but it would probably look like shit if it was projected somewhere. So I was like, what do I do with that? And I was coming up with all these ideas of, like, how could I don't know, I had some really weird ideas. I was like, what if instead of just the video, what if you filmed a camera, you know, with those, like, side viewfinders cameras used to have that you'd flip out? And then what if the documentary played on the viewfinder as, like, a way to just keep it smaller on screen? I don't know, a lot of weird shit. Even in the documentary itself, I'm like, all this artsy weird shit of, like, starting, like, when the people are talking about Roger at the end, it could be in black and white, and it could slowly become color. Like, why would I do that? Or even transitions. Should there be these little white flashes when I do edits? I don't know, just a lot of stupid shit. And I basically had to diffuse all of this stupid shit that was making it seem overwhelming, which did take a long time. Like, I just had to learn some stuff. Like, from an editing standpoint, I just had to learn that less is more, you know? I guess it's like the classic joke of, like, when people first get editing software and they're doing star wipes and stupid shit, you know? And then you realize, like, just do a cut or a fade. That's it. Anything besides that is a mistake, you know? When you watch a fucking Hollywood movie, it's a cut or a fade. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. Like, everything else is just distracting and just gets in the way. And as far as what's going to happen with this thing, I guess I needed to wait to have the experience of other things of mine catching on. Like, I talked about this before, but the main one was I did a podcast about Patrice O'Neill that just kept getting more and more and more views. So it's way over 100,000 now. And that's just so cool. It's like, sometimes you just put something up and let it sit there for 5 years and it becomes successful. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But I liked that idea so much better. Instead of, like, trying to promote something and trying to push it and trying to make it a thing, just don't worry about it. Just put it out there, move on to the next thing, and whatever happens, happens. That even, like, kind of happened with, the nonfiction book I wrote. It's just a book about video games that you can get at keithcourage.com for free. The reason I put it out for free is this same thing. I didn't want to stress myself out the way I did with that documentary. It's like, I don't want to worry about an editor and I don't want to worry about someone publishing it. I just want to get to the end of a book. I need to make this easier on myself. So I was like, let's write a book about video games, because that'll just be easier for me to do. More freeform, more weird. And it is weird. It's a weird book, but who cares? Because I was just doing it for myself. And then I put it out, and it made a little activity here and there, not a whole ton. But I just noticed lately, like I put it on archive.org just for the fuck of it, and it has like 5,000 views on there. And who knows how many of those people read it, you know? I get messages once in a while. But that's another case of like, oh yeah, I almost forgot that I even put it there. But that's the place where people are stumbling across it. Like, you just never know. You never know what's going to happen. What's important is just to get it out there, get it finished. And then what happens, happens. You know, maybe something will happen, maybe something won't. But nothing can happen until you finish something and put it out. So that also helped with this Roger Swan documentary, as I decided that. I'm just like, you know what? I just want it to be done. I want to get it done. This 9 years, it could be 19 years. It could just keep going on forever. The way I was thinking about things and approaching them before. So now it's like, all right, let's just get it done, get it up, and what happens, happens. So I put it out on December 22nd because that was Roger's birthday. I just thought, that's cool. You know, it had been done for about a month, but I'm like, let's just put it up that day because that's cool. It's just a cool little tribute. And then I posted it on, there's a Facebook group that's, you know, fans of Roger Swan. That is, you know, it's a dead group. I mean, the guy's passed away a long time ago. No one's posted in that group for a couple of years. I actually wasn't even sure how many people were in that group. But it was so cool to just get a mess of thumbs up, you know, likes or whatever, and comments from people on that group. I think I got like 100 thumbs up, and I'm like, holy shit, I didn't know there was 100 people in this group. So it's this very small, specific group that, you know, gives a shit about this thing, but that they really did give a shit is really cool. Like, just for all of the feedback to be so positive. And, you know, like on the YouTube video, it's only thumbs up. There's no thumbs down. The views are really small. They're maybe double that. I don't know. They're like, you know, triple digits, but just barely. But when you look at the analytics, like, this is like an hour and a half long full documentary. Everybody watched it, you know? It's not like when you see, like, I got YouTube videos that just get caught by algorithms and get 10,000 views, but the average view time is like 3 minutes, you know, like people bail out. This thing has very few views, but almost everybody, virtually everybody watched the whole thing. And I was like, yeah, this is awesome. You know, like, who cares that it took me 9 years? Like, I should have gotten it done faster. That was a little ridiculous. But now that it's done, like, none of that matters. It's all in the past. It's like, who cares? All that matters is that it's actually done. It's actually up. And it's really well received, and people really like it. And yeah, it's only this little small group of people. But that's cool too. That's another thing that I've kind of had my eyes open to recently. There's this YouTuber named Finn McKenty who, his channel's called the Punk Rock MBA, because he's like my age, he grew up in like the punk scene, listening to 90s and 80s punk bands and 2000s. This guy knows a lot of shit about music. But he's also a business major, and he's into the business world, and he like marries those two things, which is like strange in a way. Because on the surface, punk is all about DIY and fucking fuck the man, whatever. But on the other hand, I mean, how many millions of t-shirts have sold in the world with the fucking Misfits Fiend logo, you know? Just t-shirts alone. Punk has a big capitalist side to it. It's got a big business side to it. Every band does. It's the only way to be successful, the only way to be a going concern or whatever. So I love that he talks about that side of it, because nobody does that. And one of the things he brought up is, if you look at people who do graphic design for bands or who direct music videos, they may not have a lot of like Instagram followers, you know? Like, it's weird. It's those two sides of like, say you've got 1 million Instagram followers and, you know, people will pay you money to hold a can of Bang Energy next to your butt. But what's that really worth, you know? It seems like a lot for now, but is there any real base to that? That could all evaporate in no time. It could mean nothing. It's very transient. It's like weird. It's like 1 million hollow followers. But a lot of these people who are like amazing photographers and amazing graphic designers and amazing video directors, they do not have a lot of followers, like a really small amount. You might have like a couple hundred people on their Instagrams, because they're not famous like that. You know, they're not famous to the world. They're not famous to the masses. But what's important is that those like 100, 200 people that follow them are 100 or 200 important people. You know, they're the people that will offer them the next job and want them to design the next album cover or whatever. And it made me realize, that we're so used to the way the modern world is. You know, it's not weird for a YouTube video to have 1 million views. And you feel like if you don't have 1 million views, like, did you do it? Did you succeed? Shouldn't you have the 1 million views if your thing is actually popular or good? And we just like forget about, I guess, like the weight of those viewers. Like, hey, don't get me wrong, it would be great if my little documentary had 1 million views. I still do hope it gets more viewership as time goes on. I hope it catches on somehow. But the fact that like 100, 200 people watched it who really watched it and really gave a fuck, that's awesome, man. I mean, that is so many people. You know, like when you bring things down to reality, if that was a room full of 100 people that all really dug it, I mean, man, what could be better than that? That's fucking great. That is still one of those things that is, you know, in the pre-internet days, fucking virtually unobtainable, extremely hard to do. And in this world, I mean, it took me a long time to make this thing, but then I just uploaded it from my laptop and there you go. You know, it's amazing. It's a great fucking, like, yeah, it really helps to recontextualize what a success is. And again, what's really important is just that it's actually done. I'm not just tinkering with it forever. I'm not just constantly putting it off. It's done, it's finished, it's up there. So now, maybe nothing will happen, but something could happen, you know, and that you can't get to that point till the thing's done. There is no possibility for anything to happen until your project is done. But once it's done, who knows? And along those lines, there's this dude from Japan who, he has a Japanese name, but he has really good English. So far, I've been surprised how easy he is to communicate with, because when I was visiting Japan, that's not always the case. But this guy, he's from the area of Japan where Roger Swan lived when he died. And he also found out about Roger after Roger's death, but then went back through and learned about the guy through his stuff. And he sent me this Facebook message that he was hoping to do something like this himself, because next year will be the 10th anniversary of Roger's death. And he has all these connections to, there's basically his city in Japan has a sister city in America that has this film festival that he's been to this other city a bunch, and him and a bunch of the people he knows are all connected in with this film festival. Basically, he was like hoping to get something together about Roger, but didn't really know if he could or what it was going to be. And then I dropped this thing in his lap, you know, that's all done. And if I do say so myself, is really good. Like, I really did the best I could do with, you know, it's tough because it's all old YouTube footage. Sometimes there was music Roger put in that I couldn't take out, you know, like I'm very constrained in what I could do. But I really tried my best to really make it as good as I could make it. There's a part in particular, if you watch the documentary, where Roger's talking about these weird rundown shacks that are down by the river. And that's the first time he realized there were homeless people just living in these weird shacks in Tokyo. And when you contrast that to the, you know, just the really frivolous aspects of Japanese culture, especially in Tokyo, I was really proud of that part where it's like he's talking about this creepy thing that's happening. And I found all this footage of like the wacky weird shit that he also took footage of, and just like, I think it's a good documentary is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, this guy sent me a message and was like, hey, what would you think about the idea of trying to get this documentary into this film festival? And on his side, he was like, you know, I know there's going to be a lot of stuff like trying to get in touch with Roger's family to make sure they're cool with it, going through whatever processes need to be done with this film festival. And I was saying to him, I think at the very least this thing will need like an introduction. Someone will need to explain why it's 480p and why the camera is so shaky and why everything looks so bad, especially at first. That, you know, that's part of the charm of like going back through the digital archives and how quickly in the past 10 years how incredibly better video technology has become. You can't just drop somebody in there. But also I was like, it's cool to have somebody mention something like that. But that does happen to me pretty often, where somebody will pitch me like some idea for a podcast, or they're like, hey, I heard your Patrice podcast, I heard your Scott Bromley podcast, you could do one about this guy. But it's just a name, and it's like, great, so what, now I'm supposed to spend the next 8 months digging through and putting all this thing together? You're just putting work in my lap. Like, no thanks. Or even people that'll send me like job links, like, hey, you know, this fucking movie website needs a writer, you're a writer, why don't you do that? It's like, fuck that. Why would you just give me work to do? I don't want to do that. So like, if this guy had done that, just like, hey, I know about this film festival, here's the link, do what you do, you should fucking submit to it. I wouldn't. I just wouldn't do it. It's like, no, you're just giving me work to do. I don't want to do that. I don't even know where to begin. But the key with this dude is, yeah, he already had this idea. He just needs the content. He needs the piece. And so far, I mean, who knows where this is going to go? Maybe it'll go nowhere. But he's the one taking the lead, you know? He's like, he knows people involved with this film festival. He's done stuff with them before. He's interested in the subject matter. He wants to make this happen, and I'll do whatever I can to help him make this happen, you know? Like, that would be awesome. So who knows? Maybe this thing will get played at a film festival. Maybe I will get to that point that I wanted to get to in the first place. And maybe it won't work out, you know? It doesn't really matter. I'm not, you know, who cares? It would be nice, but it doesn't matter. The thing's done, it's out there. My end of the bargain is really done. I did get to where I was trying to get to. Everything else is just gravy. But I think it's such a perfect example of, now maybe something else will happen. Now maybe something will go further. But it couldn't until I actually finished this thing. And it's like with my nonfiction book, it didn't really go anywhere, but it might have. And I couldn't know till it was done, till I put it out. So now this novel I'm working on, who knows? Again, maybe it won't really go anywhere. Maybe someday it'll be a movie with action figures. You know? Seems pretty fucking unlikely. But the only way any of this stuff can happen is to get to the end, is to complete the project, is to finish it and put it out. So I guess I just wanted to tell that little story because I've brought up that documentary a few times in this podcast as like a side project, a side example, a non-writing example of a similar situation to working on this novel. And because it's done, and I hope you go watch it. Tokyo Swan, a Roger Swan documentary on YouTube. But also, I guess, just to try to confirm, I guess, that all this stuff I've been saying on this podcast does seem to be working. You know, it does seem to be paying dividends. It does seem to be paying off. Because you can find a million people talking about a million things, and who the fuck knows if any of it is true? Who the fuck knows if any of it is helpful? Who the fuck knows if any of these productivity tips are if they actually work? And I guess I'm just trying not to be one of these people. Like, if I made this podcast 10 years ago, it would just be me rambling off a bunch of stupid bullshit that I thought was true, but I don't know why I think that, and I don't have any evidence to back up any of it. You know, I think it's the reason I'm doing it now is because I am seeing results and things are finally finishing, and my lifetime of grinding has finally reached a point where there's some dividends. Things are coming out of it. It's working. This idea of just sticking to a project, making sure you work on it every day, but not pushing yourself on each day too hard. Don't burn yourself out. Just work on it a little every day, and that's more than enough to ask of yourself. That's more than hard enough, but it will get you to the end. It's the only way I've ever found to get consistently to the end of these big projects. It's just don't let go. Every day, do a little something. So yeah, it's not bullshit. It works. I just finished this huge ass documentary that had been this fucking weight around my neck for years and years, and now it's done. So anyway, since this is kind of a weird episode, while we're on this topic of productivity stuff and slightly less actual writing talk, I want to play in this episode this guy, Naval Ravikant. who's like an angel investor, does a bunch of business stuff. He started doing, like putting out tweets about productivity and then doing podcasts that basically his fellow business people were like, why are you doing this? Like, why are you trying to talk to the masses about what makes you a productive businessman? You know, like, all they're going to do is hate on you. All they're going to do is give you a bunch of shit. Our world and their world does not mix, you know. And he's like, no, I want to try to explain this to people. Like, he had these ideas about all kinds of things that he's like, I want to tell people. I think it's important. And I'm glad that he did, because this guy, just whenever I listen to him, it's incredible how much stuff I relate to or seems useful, even though it's not directly about the kind of stuff I do. But it is, you know, it's like, it's just universal. Being productive, being a valuable fucking cog in the big social machine. It really doesn't matter what area of life you're in. There's a lot of principles that apply. And I especially like that this guy's a business dude, because again, like I was saying, there's so many people, you can find a million fucking gurus that'll just tell you whatever weird shit that they've been thinking about. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but where's the fucking evidence? You know, where is the proof that all this shit they're saying is actually having any positive result? So that's what I like about this guy, is there's just a certain undeniability about being a business success. And he wasn't right away. He gets into it. He talks, you know, this thing failed, but I stuck with it, and I went to this, and I went to that. And I mean, he's crazy successful at this point. And I just think to me, that's a more valuable person to listen to, because maybe some of this will work for you, maybe some of it won't. But it's not all just bullshit, you know? It's like something good came of the philosophy and the ideas and the tips and tricks that this guy fucking espouses. There's concrete, distinct evidence. There's proof, if you will. And he's just an interesting guy, and I just love this. So it's him, this guy, Naval, who, if you just search Naval, I watch these on YouTube, but he has a podcast too. He just puts out these little, like, 10-minute mini podcasts with his friend. And then they combine them all together recently into, like, it's like a 3.5-hour video of, like, here's all of them. Boom. So this is only about a half an hour of him talking about stuff. I just picked out some stuff, the early stuff he talked about, that, again, it doesn't, maybe on the surface, it doesn't seem like it relates to being a writer. But I think it does, because, I mean, we're our own little entrepreneurs, you know? We're our own little creative people who cannot be replaced, you know? We're not just a cog in the machine. We're a specialized cog or whatever. I'm just going to let this guy talk. It'll be better if you just listen to him. There's no need for me to start rambling about it. But if you like this little taste, and stick with it, because again, like he talks, it's more businessy at the start of this, but by the end, it's very much, even just this little half-hour bit, very much applicable to being a creative person. So give it a listen, and I just love this guy. Whenever I go back and listen to this shit, I'm like, yeah, this guy, man, he's not full of shit, and that's way more than you can say for most people. So his name is Naval Ravikant, and again, I think he's the only Naval, Naval, so it's pretty easy to find his stuff. And he has so much other stuff I could have put in. Like, again, like every little bit, I'm like, oh, this is a good one, and this is a good one. I wanted to keep it to half an hour just so it's not too much, but like I was just listening to, he's talking about like how modern society, how the downsides to risk are so minimal, you know? It seems scary to go out in the world and to try to do your own thing and blaze your own trail, but the downside is probably not going to be that bad. You know, the worst case scenario is really not that bad. Whereas the upside, the potential upside, is fucking unlimited. It's insane. It's crazy how big an idea can get, how big a project can get. So don't be scared, man. Do it. Do it. You know? What have you really got to lose? But, I mean, it's easy to say that, but then to have him break down the steps and the reality of here's why I say that, here's what happened to me in my life, here's the worst thing, and how easy it was to recover from. Meanwhile, here's the best thing, and it's unimaginable in a pre-internet world especially. It's fucking great stuff. So, all right. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next time. Keep on grinding, man. Keep it up. Keep on rolling. Sorry I said that. Okay, goodbye.
You probably know Naval from his Twitter account, and we're going to be talking about his epic tweet storm on how to get rich without getting lucky. We're going to go through most of the tweets in detail, give Naval a chance to expand on them, and just generally riff on the topic. He's also the co-founder of AngelList and Opinions. He's a prolific tech investor in companies like Twitter, Uber, and many more. And I'm the co-founder of AngelList with Naval, and I also co-authored the Venture Hacks blog with him back in the day.
Yeah, the How to Get Rich tweet storm definitely hit a nerve. A lot of people say it was helpful, reach across aisles, and people outside of the tech industry, people in all walks of life. People do want to know how to solve their money problems. And everyone vaguely knows that they want to be wealthy, but they don't have a good set of principles to do it by.
What's the difference between wealth, money, and status?
Wealth is the thing that you really want. Wealth is assets that earn while you sleep. Wealth is the factory that with the robots that's cranking out things. Wealth is the computer program that's running at night that's serving other customers. Wealth is even money in the bank that is being reinvested into other assets and into other businesses. Even a house can be a form of wealth because you can rent it out, although that's probably a lower use of productivity in the land than actually doing some commercial enterprise. So my definition of wealth is much more businesses and assets that can earn while you sleep. But really the reason you want wealth is because it buys you freedom. So you don't have to wear a tie like a collar around your neck. So you don't have to wake up at 7 a.m. and rush to work and sit in commute traffic. So you don't have to waste away your entire life grinding all the productive hours into a soulless job that doesn't fulfill you. So the purpose of wealth is freedom. It's nothing more than that. It's not to buy fur coats or drive Ferraris or sail yachts or jet around the world in your Gulfstream. That stuff gets really boring and really stupid really fast. It's really just so that you are your own sovereign individual. You're not going to get that unless you really want it. And the entire world wants it. And the entire world is working hard at it. And to some extent, it is competitive. It's a positive sum game, but there are competitive elements to it because there's a finite amount of resources right now in society. And to get the resources to do what you want, you have to stand out. Money is how we transfer wealth. Money is social credits. It is the ability to have credits and debits on other people's time. If I do my job right, if I create value for society, society says, oh, thank you. We owe you something in the future for the work that you did in the past. Here's a little IOU. Let's call that money. And that money gets debased because people steal the IOUs. The government prints extra IOUs. People renege on their IOUs. But really what money is trying to be is it's trying to be a reliable IOU from society that you are owed something for something you or someone who gave you the money did in the past. And we can transfer these IOUs around. So really money is how we transfer wealth. There are fundamentally two huge games in life that people play. One is the money game, because money is not going to solve all your problems, but it's going to solve all your money problems. So I think that people know that. They realize that, so they want to make money. But at the same time, many of them deep down believe that they can't make it. They don't want any wealth creation to happen. So they virtue signal by attacking the whole enterprise by saying, well, making money is evil and you shouldn't do it, blah, blah, blah. But what they're trying to do is they're actually playing the other game, which is a status game. They're trying to be high status in the eyes of other people watching by saying, well, I don't need money. We don't want money. And then status is just your ranking in the social hierarchy. So wealth is not a zero-sum game. Everybody in the world can have a house. Because you have a house doesn't take away from my ability to have a house. If anything, the more houses that are built, the easier it becomes to build houses, the more we know about building houses, and just the more people that can have houses. So wealth is a very positive sum game. We create things together. We're starting this endeavor to create this, hopefully, piece of art that explains what we're doing. At the end of it, something brand new will be created. It's a positive sum game. Status, on the other hand, is a zero-sum game. It's a very old game. We've been playing it since monkey tribes, and it's hierarchical. Who's number one, who's number two, who's number three. And for number three to move to number two has to move out of that slot. So status is a zero-sum game. Politics is an example of a status game. Even sports is an example of a status game. To be the winner, there must be a loser. I don't fundamentally love status games. They play an important role in our society, so we figure out who's in charge. But fundamentally, you play them because they're a necessary evil. The problem is on an evolutionary basis, like if you go back thousands of years, status is a much better predictor of survival than wealth is. You couldn't have wealth before the farming age, before farmers, because you couldn't store things. Hunter-gatherers carried everything on their backs. So hunter-gatherers lived entirely in status-based societies. Farmers started going to wealth-based societies, and the modern industrial economies are much more heavily wealth-based societies. But there's always a subtle competition going on between status and wealth. For example, when journalists attack rich people or like attack the technology industry, they're really bidding for status. They're saying, no, the people are more important, and I, the journalist, represents the people, and therefore I am more important. The problem is that by playing these status games, to win at a status game, you have to put somebody else down. That's why you should avoid status games in your life, because they make you into an angry, combative person. You're always fighting to put other people down, to put yourself and the people that you like up. And they're always going to exist. There's no way around it. But just realize that most of the times when you're trying to create wealth, you're actually getting attacked by someone else. And they're trying to look like a goody two shoes. But really what they're doing is they're trying to up their own status at your expense. They're just playing a different game, and it's a worse game. It's a zero-sum game instead of a positive-sum game.
One thing you mentioned before the interview that stuck with me was the idea that you think everyone can become rich, and that perhaps some of the ways of getting rich or the idea of wealth is vilified by some people in other countries, say. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's this notion that making money is evil, right? It's like rooted all the way back down to money is the root of all evil. People think that the bankers steal our money. And, it's somewhat true in that in a lot of the world, there's a lot of theft going on all the time. The history of the world, in some sense, is this predator-prey relationship between makers and takers. There are people who go out and create things and build things and work hard on things. And then there are people who come along and take with a sword or a gun or taxes or crony capitalism or communism or what have you. There's all these different methods to steal. That's just the nature of how any complex system is built. But what I am focused on is true wealth creation. It's not about taking money. It's not about taking something from somebody else, but it's from creating abundance. Obviously, there's not a finite number of jobs or a finite amount of wealth. Otherwise, we would still be sitting around in caves, figuring out how to divide up pieces of firewood and, the occasional dead deer. So most of the wealth in civilization, in fact, not most, all of it has been created. And it got created from somewhere. It got created from people. It got created from technology, it got created from productivity, it got created from hard work. So this idea that it's stolen is, I think, this horrible zero-sum game that people who are trying to gain status play. But the reality is everyone can be rich. And we can see that by seeing that in the first world, everyone is richer than almost anyone who was alive 200 years ago. 200 years ago, nobody had antibiotics, nobody had cars, nobody had electricity, nobody had the iPhone. So all of these things are inventions that have made us wealthier as a species. Today, I would rather be a poor person in a first world country than be a rich person in Louis XIV's France. I'd rather be a poor person today than an aristocrat back then. And that's just because of wealth creation. The engine of technology is science that is applied for the purpose of creating abundance. So I think fundamentally everybody can be wealthy. And the thought experiment I want you to think through is imagine if everybody had the knowledge of a good software engineer and a good hardware engineer. If you could go out there and you could build robots and computers and bridges and program them, let's say every human knew how to do that. What do you think society would look like in 20 years? My guess is what would happen is we would build robots, machines, software, and hardware to do everything, and we would all be living in massive abundance. We would essentially be retired in the sense that none of us would have to work for any of the basics. We'd even have robotic nurses. We'd have like machine-driven hospitals. We'd have self-driving cars. We'd have farms that are 100% automated. We'd have clean energy. So at that point, we could use technology breakthroughs to get everything that we wanted. And if anyone is still working at that point, they're working as a form of expressing their creativity. They're working because it's in them to contribute and to build and design things. So I don't think capitalism is evil. Capitalism is actually good. It's just that it gets hijacked. It gets hijacked by improper pricing of externalities. It gets hijacked by improper deals where like you have corruption or you have monopolies. Overall, capitalism is intrinsic to the human species. Capitalism is not something we invented. Capitalism is not even something we discovered. It is innate to us in every exchange that we have. When you and I exchange information, I want some information back from you. I give you information. You give me information. If we weren't having a good information exchange, you go talk to somebody else. So the notion of exchange and keeping track of credits and debits, this is built into us as flexible social animals. We are the only animals in the animal kingdom that cooperate across genetic boundaries. Most animals don't even cooperate, but when they do, they cooperate only in packs where they co-evolve together and they share blood, so they have some shared interest. Humans don't have that. And what lets us cooperate? It's because we can keep track of debits and credits, who put in how much work, who contributed how much. That's all free market capitalism is. So I strongly believe that it is innate to the human species, and we are going to create more and more wealth and abundance for everybody. Everybody can be wealthy. Everybody can be retired. Everybody can be successful. It is merely a question of education and desire. You have to want it. If you don't want it, that's fine. Then you opt out of the game. But don't try and put down the people who are playing the game, because that's the game that keeps you in a comfortable, warm bed at night. That's the game that keeps a roof over your head. That's a game that keeps your supermarket stocked. That's the game that keeps the iPhone buzzing in your pocket. So it is a beautiful game that is worth playing ethically, rationally, morally, socially for the human race. And it's going to continue to make us all richer and richer until we have massive wealth creation for anybody who wants it.
And it's not just individuals secretly despising wealth, right? There's countries, groups, political parties that overtly despise wealth, or at least seem to.
That's right. And so what those countries, political parties, and groups are reduced to playing the zero-sum game of status. And in the process, they destroy wealth creation. They drag everybody down to their level, which is why the US is a very popular country for immigrants, because it's the American dream. Anyone can come here, be poor, and then work really hard and make money and get wealthy, but even just make some basic money for their lives. Obviously, the definition of wealth is different for different people. A first world citizen's definition of wealth might be, oh, I have to make millions of dollars and I'm completely done. Whereas to a third world poor immigrant just entering the country, and we were poor immigrants who came here when I was fairly young to the United States, wealth may just be a much lower number. It may just be like, I don't have to work a manual labor job for the rest of my life that I don't want to work. But groups that despise it will essentially bring the entire group down to that level. If you get too many takers and not enough makers, society falls apart. You end up with a communist country. Look at Venezuela, right? They were so busy taking and dividing and reallocating that people are literally starving in the streets and losing kilograms of body weight every year just through sheer starvation. Another way to think about it is, imagine an organism that has too many parasites. Any organism can only withstand a small number of parasites. And when the parasitic element gets too far out of control, you die. So, that again, I'm talking about ethical wealth creation. I'm not talking about monopolies. I'm not talking about crony capitalism. I'm not talking about mispriced externalities like the environment. I'm talking about free minds and free markets, small scale exchange between humans that's voluntary and doesn't have an outsized impact on others. But I think that kind of wealth creation, if a society does not respect it, if a group does not respect it, that society will plunge into ruin and darkness.
Obviously, we want to be wealthy and we want to get there in this lifetime without having to rely on luck. A lot of people think making money is about luck. It's not. It's about becoming the kind of person that makes money. I like to think that if I lost all my money and if you drop me on a random street in any English-speaking country, within 5 to 10 years, I'd be wealthy again, right? Because it's just a skill set that I've developed and I think anyone can develop. In 1,000 parallel universes, you want to be wealthy in 999 of them. You don't want to be wealthy in the 50 of them where you got lucky. So we want to factor luck out of it. There's really 4 kinds of luck that we were talking about. This came from a book. Mark Andreessen wrote a blog post about it. But there's different kinds of luck. The first kind of luck you might just say is like blind luck, where I just got lucky because something completely out of my control happened. That's fortune, that's fate, etc. Then there's luck that comes through persistence, hard work, hustle, motion, which is when you're just running around creating lots of opportunities, you're generating a lot of energy, you're doing a lot of things. Lots of things will just get stirred up in the dust. It's almost like mixing a petri dish and seeing what combines, or mixing a bunch of reagents and seeing what combines. You're just generating enough force and hustle and energy that luck will find you. A third way is that you just become very good at spotting luck. So if you are very skilled in a field, you will notice when a lucky break happens in that field when other people who aren't attuned to it won't notice. So you become sensitive to luck, and that's through skill and knowledge and work. And then the last kind of luck is the weirdest, hardest kind, but that's what we want to talk about, which is where you build a unique character, a unique brand, a unique mindset where then luck finds you. For example, let's say that you're the best person in the world at deep sea underwater diving, and you're known to like take on deep sea underwater dives that nobody else will even attempt to dare. And then by sheer luck, somebody finds a sunken treasure ship off the coast they can't get at. Well, their luck just became your luck because they're going to come to you to get that treasure and you're going to get paid for it. Now, that's an extreme example, but it's just showing how like the person who got lucky by finding the treasure chest, that was blind luck. But them coming to you and asking you to extract it and having to give you half, that's not luck. You created your own luck. You put yourself in a position to be able to capitalize on that luck or to attract that luck when nobody else has created that opportunity for themselves. So when we talk about without getting lucky, we want to be deterministic. We don't want to leave it to chance.
Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on the idea that in 1,000 parallel universes, you want to get rich in 999 of them? I think some people are going to see that and say, that sounds impossible, sounds like it's too good to be true.
No, I don't think it's impossible. I think that you may have to work a little bit harder at it given your starting circumstances. I mean, remember, I started as a poor kid in India, right? So if I can make it, anybody can in that sense. Now, obviously, I had all my limbs and I had my mental faculties and I did have an education. So there are some prerequisites you can't get past. But if you're listening to this video or podcast, you probably have the requisite means at your disposal, which is a functioning body and a functioning mind. And I've encountered plenty of bad luck along the way. The first little fortune that I made, I instantly lost in the stock market. The second little fortune that I made, or I should have made, I got cheated by my business partners. It's only the third time around has been a charm. And even then, it has been a slow and steady struggle. And I haven't made money in my life in one giant payout. It's always been a whole bunch of small things piling up. So it's more about consistently creating wealth by creating businesses and creating opportunities and creating investments. It hasn't been like a giant one-off thing. My personal wealth has not been generated by one big year. It just stacks up little bit chips at a time. More options, more businesses, more investments, more things I can do. It's going to be a long lifetime of learning, of reading, of creating that's just going to compound. So we're talking about getting wealthy so you can retire, so you have your freedom. Not retire in the sense that you don't do anything, but in the sense that you don't have to be any place you don't want to be. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And you can wake up when you want. You can sleep when you want. You don't have a boss. That's freedom. So we're talking about enough wealth to get to freedom. And especially thanks to the internet these days, those opportunities are massively abundant. I, in fact, have too many ways to make money. I don't have enough time. I literally have opportunities pouring out of my ears. And the thing I keep running out of is time. There's just so many ways to create wealth, to create products, to create businesses, to create opportunities, and to, as a byproduct, get paid by society that I just can't even handle it all.
This fourth kind of luck can almost come out of eccentric ways that you do your things. And that eccentricity is not necessarily a bad thing in this case. In fact, it's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely, because the world is a very efficient place. So everyone has dug through all the obvious places to dig. And so to find something that's new and novel and uncovered, it helps to be operating on a frontier where right there you have to be a little eccentric to be out on the frontier by yourself. And then you just have to be willing to dig deeper than other people do, deeper than seems irrational just because you're interested.
Yeah, the two quotes that I've seen that express this kind of luck are this one from Sam Altman, where he said, extreme people get extreme results. I think that's pretty nice. And then there's this other one from Jeffrey Pfeffer, who's a professor at Stanford, that you can't be normal and expect abnormal returns. I've always enjoyed that one too.
Yeah, and one quote that I like, which is the exact opposite of that, is play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Right? A lot of people spend a lot of their time playing social games, like on Twitter, where you're just trying to improve your social standing, and you basically win stupid social prizes, which are worthless.
I guess the last thing that I have is just the idea that by pursuing these kinds of luck, especially the last one, basically everything but dumb luck, by pursuing them, you essentially run out of unluck. So if you just keep stirring the pot and stirring the pot, that alone, you will run out of unluck.
Yeah, or it could just be a reversion to the mean, right? So then you at least neutralize luck so that it's your own talents that come into play.
Next, you go into more specific details on how you can actually get rich and how you can't get rich. The first point was about how you're not going to get rich. You're not going to get rich renting out your time. You must own equity, a piece of a business, to gain your financial freedom.
This is probably one of the absolute most important points. People seem to think that you can create wealth and make money through work, and it's probably not going to work. There are many reasons for that, but the most basic is just that your inputs are very closely tied to your outputs. In almost any salaried job, even a one that's paying a lot per hour, like a lawyer or a doctor, you're still putting in the hours, and every hour you get paid. So what that means is when you're sleeping, you're not earning. When you're retired, you're not earning. When you're on vacation, you're not earning. And you can't earn non-linearly. If you look at even doctors who get rich, like really rich, it's because they open a business. They open like a private practice, and that private practice builds a brand, and that brand attracts people, or they build some kind of a medical device or a procedure or a process where they have intellectual property. So essentially, you're working for somebody else. And that person is taking on the risk and has the accountability and the intellectual property and the brand. So they're just not going to pay you enough. They're going to pay you the bare minimum that they have to get you to do the job. And that can be a high bare minimum, but it's still not going to be true wealth where you're retired. And then finally, you're actually just not even creating that much original for society. You're just doing things over and over. And you're essentially replaceable because you're now doing a set role. Most set roles can be taught. If they can be taught, like in a school, then eventually you're going to be competing with someone who's got more recent knowledge, who's been taught and is coming in to replace you. You're much more likely to be doing a job that can be eventually replaced by a robot or by an AI. And it doesn't even have to be wholesale replaced overnight. It can be replaced a little bit at a time. And that eats into your wealth creation and therefore your earning capability. So fundamentally, your inputs are matched to your outputs. You're replaceable and you're not being creative. I just don't think that that is a way that you can truly make money. So everybody who really makes money at some point owns a piece of a product or a business or some kind of IP. That can be through stock options. So if you can be working at a tech company, that's a fine way to start. But usually the real wealth is created by starting your own companies or by, even investors, they're in an investment firm and they're buying equity. So these are much more the routes to wealth. It doesn't come to the hours. You really just want a job or a career or a profession where your inputs don't match your outputs. So if you look at modern society, businesses that have high creativity and high leverage tend to be ones where you could do an hour of work and it can have a huge effect, or you can do 1,000 hours of work and it can have no effect. For example, look at software engineering. One great engineer can, for example, create Bitcoin and create billions of dollars worth of value. An engineer who's working on the wrong thing or not quite as good or just not as creative or thoughtful or whatever can work for an entire year, and every piece of code that they ship ends up not getting used. Customers don't want it. That is an example of a profession where the input and the outputs are highly disconnected. It's not based on the number of hours that you put in. Whereas on the extreme other end, if you're a lumberjack, even the best lumberjack in the world, assuming they're not working with tools, so the inputs and outputs are pretty connected, they're just using an axe or a saw, the best lumberjack in the world may be like 3x better than one of the worst lumberjacks, right? It's not going to be a gigantic difference. So you want to look for professions and careers where the inputs and the outputs are highly disconnected. Creativity, so the higher the creativity component of a profession, the more likely it is to have disconnected inputs and outputs. So I think that if you're looking at professions where your inputs and your outputs are highly connected, it's going to be very, very, very hard to create wealth and make wealth for yourself in that process.
Any other big things you should avoid other than renting out your time?
People who are living far below their means enjoy a freedom that people busy upgrading their lifestyles just can't fathom. And I think that's very important, like just to not upgrade your lifestyle all the time to maintain your freedom. And it just gives you freedom of operation. Once you make a little bit of money, you still want to be living like your old self so that just the worry goes away. So don't run out to upgrade that house and lifestyle and all that stuff. Let's say you're getting paid $1,000 an hour. The problem is that when you go into a work lifestyle like that, you don't just suddenly go from making $20 an hour to making $1,000 an hour. That's a progression over a long career. And as that happens, one subtle problem is that you upgrade your lifestyle as you make more and more money. And that upgrading of the lifestyle ups what you consider to be wealth, and you stay in this wage slave trap. So I forget who said it. Maybe it was Nassim Taleb, but he said, the most dangerous things are heroin and a monthly salary, right? Because they're highly addictive. The way you want to get wealthy is you want to be poor and working and working and working. And this is, for example, how the tech industry works, where you don't make any money for 10 years. And then suddenly in year 11, you might have a giant payday, which is, why, by the way, one reason why these very high marginal tax rates for the so-called wealthy are flawed, because the highest risk-taking, most creative professions literally lose money for a decade of your life while you take massive risk and you bleed and bleed and bleed. And then suddenly in year 11 or year 15, you might have one single big payday. But then, of course, Uncle Sam show up and say, hey, you know what? You just made a lot of money this year. Therefore, you're rich. Therefore, you're evil. And you got to hand it all over to us. So it just destroys those kinds of creative risk-taking professions. But ideally, you want to make your money in discrete lumps separated over long periods of time so that your own lifestyle does not have a chance to adapt quickly. And then you can say, okay, now I'm done. Now I'm retired. Now I'm free. I'm still going to work because you got to do something with your life, but I'm going to work on only the things that I want when I want. And it's going to be much more creative expression and much less about money.
You're not going to get rich renting out your time, but you say that you will get rich by giving society what it wants, but does not yet know how to get at scale.
That's right. So essentially, as we talked about before, money is IOUs from society saying you did something good in the past. Now here's something that we owe you for the future. And so society will pay you for creating things that it wants. But society doesn't yet know how to create those things, because if it did, it wouldn't need you. They would already be stamped out big time. Almost everything in your house, in your workplace, and on the street used to be technology at one point in time. There was a time when oil was technology that made J.D. Rockefeller rich. There was a time when cars were technology that made Henry Ford rich. So technology is just the set of things, as Alan Kay said, that don't quite work yet. Once something works, it's no longer technology. So society always wants new things. And if you want to be wealthy, you want to figure out which one of those things you can provide for society that it does not yet know how to get, but it will want. That's natural to you and within your skill set, within your capabilities. And then you have to figure out how to scale it. Because if you just build one of it, that's not enough. You got to build thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions or billions of them. So everybody can have one. Steve Jobs and his team, of course, figured out that society would want smartphones, computer in their pocket that had all the phone capability times 100 and be easy to use. So they figured out how to build that, and then they figured out how to scale it, and then they figured out how to get one into every first world citizen's pocket, and eventually every third world citizen too. And so because of that, they're handsomely rewarded, and Apple is the most valuable company in the world.
The way I tried to put it was that the entrepreneur's job is to try to bring the high end to the mass market.
It starts as high end. First, it starts as an act of creativity. First, you create it just because you want it. You want it and you know how to build it and you need it. And so you build it for yourself. Then you figure out how to get it to other people. And then for a little while, rich people have it. Like, for example, rich people had chauffeurs, and then they had black town cars. And then Uber came along and everyone's private driver was available to everybody. And now you can even see Uber pools that are replacing shuttle buses because it's just more convenient. And then you get scooters, which are even further down market of that. So you're right. It's about distributing what rich people used to have to everybody. But the entrepreneur's job starts even before that, which is creation. Entrepreneurship is essentially an act of creating something new from scratch, predicting that society will want it, and then figuring out how to scale it and get it to everybody in a profitable way, in a self-sustaining way.
You said the internet has massively broadened the possible space of careers. Most people haven't figured this out yet.
The fundamental property of the internet, more than any other single thing, is it connects every human to each other human on the planet. You can now reach everyone, whether it's by emailing them personally, whether it's by broadcasting to them on Twitter, whether it's by posting something on Facebook that they find, whether it's by putting up a website they come and access. It connects everyone to everyone. So the internet is an inter-networking tool. It connects everybody. That is its superpower. So you want to use that. What that helps you figure out is that the internet means that you can find your audience for your product or your talent and skill, no matter how far away they are. For example, Nenad, who's Illustratus, if he was in these videos pre-internet, how would he get the message out there? It would just be, what would he do? He would run around where he lives in his neighborhood, showing it to people on a computer or a screen, or he would try to get it played at his local movie theater. It was impossible. It only works because he can put it on the internet. And then how many people in the world are really interested in it, or even interested in what we're talking about, are really going to absorb it, right? It's going to be a very small subset of humanity. The key is being able to reach them. So what the internet does is allows any niche obsession, which could be just the weirdest thing. It could be like people who collect snakes, to like people who like to ride hot air balloons, to people who like to sail around the world by themselves, just one person on a craft. So whatever niche obsession you have, the internet allows you to scale. Now, that's not to say that what you build will be the next Facebook or reach billions of users. But if you just want to reach 50,000 passionate people like you, there's an audience out there for you. So the beauty of this is that we have 7 billion human beings on this planet. The combinatorics of human DNA are incredible. Everyone is completely different. You'll never meet any two people who are even vaguely similar to each other that can substitute for each other. It's not like you can say, well, Nivi just left my life, so I can have this other person come in and he's just like Nivi and I get the same feelings, the same responses, and the same ideas. No, there are no substitutes for people. People are completely unique. So given that each person has different skill sets, different interests, different obsessions, and it's that diversity that becomes a creative superpower. So each person can be creatively superb at their own unique thing. But before, that didn't matter, because if you were living in a little fishing village in Italy, like your fishing village didn't necessarily need your completely unique skill, and you had to conform to just the few jobs that were available. But now today, you can be completely unique. You can go out on the internet and you can find your audience and you can build a business and create a product and build wealth and make people happy, just uniquely expressing yourself through the internet. The space of careers has been so broadened. Esports players, people making millions of dollars playing Fortnite, people creating videos and uploading them, YouTube broadcasters, bloggers, podcasters. Joe Rogan, I read, true or false, I don't know, but I read that he's going to make about $100 million a year on his podcast, and he's had 2 billion downloads. Even PewDiePie, this is a hilarious tweet that I retweeted the other day. PewDiePie is the #1 trusted name in news. This is a kid, I think, in Sweden, and he's got 3 times the distribution of the top cable news networks just on his news channel. It's not even on his entertainment channel. The internet enables any niche interest, as long as you're the best at it, to scale out. And the great news is, because every human is different, everyone is the best at something, being themselves. I like things when I can compress them down because they're easy to remember and easy to hook onto. But that one was escape competition through authenticity. So when you're competing with people, it's because you're copying them. It's because you're trying to do the same thing. But every human is different. Don't copy. I know we're mimetic creatures, and Rene Girard has a whole mimesis theory, but it's much easier than that. Don't imitate. Don't copy. Just do your own thing. No one can compete with you on being you. It's that simple. And so the more authentic you are to who you are and what you love to do, the less competition you're going to have. So you can escape competition through authenticity when you realize that no one can compete with you on being you. And normally that would have been useless advice pre-internet. Post-internet, you can turn that into a career.
I'm a brother down, cause it's nothing to me. It's nothing to me. Everyone's saying that it's wrong to cheat, but there's no other way to get your life on easy street. Get your life on easy street. Someone else telling you what you're living for, been knocking you down and now you're looking for more. More. The only sound you hear is a closing door, been looking for peace and they're bringing you more. More. Rich man crying cause his money's time, the poor man smiling cause he knows he ain't blind. He knows he ain't blind. There's a man over there says it's tougher than me, but I got eyes that can see through fantasy. I can see through fantasy. I think my life is passing me by. I think my life is is passing me by. Take it all back, cause it don't mean nothing if you give it away. Then you're looking for something back. You're looking for something back. Wake up every morning, there's nothing there. No reason to die, but no reason to care. Someone else telling you what you're living for, been knocking you down, and now you're looking for more. All the only sound you hear is a closing door. Been looking for peace and they're bringing you more. Got one life to live and we're doing it wrong. You see, I'm a brother down cause there's nothing to me. There's nothing to me. And there's a rich man crying cause his money's time. A poor man smiling cause he knows he ain't blind. He knows he ain't blind. I think my life is passing me by. I think my life is passing me by. You see, oh, we're doing it wrong, you see, oh, we're doing it wrong, we're doing it wrong, you see.